Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Vishnupadaya, Krishna Prasaya, Bhutale, Srimati Bhakti Vedanta, Swami Namane. Vishnupadaya, Krishna Prasaya, Bhutale, Srimati Bhakti Vedanta, Swami Namane. निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेश Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe, Radhe, Jai Radhe, Jai Shri Radhe. Jai Radhe, Shoulder परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर श्री श्रीमान अभय चरणारविंद भक्त वेदांत गोस्वामी हरशील प्रभुपाद की जयम नितिल्या प्रविष्टो पशुपाद ब्रह्मंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर श्री श्रीमान भक्त सिद्धांत सरस्वती हरशील प्रभुपाद की अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की रामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की प्रेम सहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गो गोविंद श्याम राधा गिरी गोवर्धन की वृंदावन धाम की मायपुर धाम की मधुरपुरी धाम की जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की द्वारकापुरी धाम की गंगा माई की यमुना माई की तुलसी देवी की भक्ति देवी की सामवेद भक्तवृंद की गो प्रेमानंद all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, all glories Shri Shri Prabhupada. Namo Ashokadaya Krishna Prasthaya Vibhuri Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prajayani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashacharesha Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Samsara sagare matnam dinam nam karunanidhe कर्मग्रहगृहीतांगं मामुद्धरवानवात् श्रीमद्भागवताख्योऽयं प्रत्यक्ष कृष्णमेव हि स्वीकृतोऽसि मया नाथ मुक्त्यर्थं भवसागरे मनोरथे मदीयोऽयं सबला सर्वदा त्वया निर्विघ्नेनैव कर्तव्यं दासोऽहं तव केशव भवे भवे यथा भक्ति पादयोर्तम जायते तथा कुरुष्व देवेश नाथस्त्वं नो यद प्रभो नाम संकीर्तनं यस्य सर्वपापप्रणाशनं प्रणामो दुःखशमनं तं नमामि हरिं परम् जन्माद्यस्य यतोऽन्वयादितरतः अर्थेष्वभिज्ञस्वरात् तेने ब्रह्महृदाय आदिकवये मुह्यन्ते यत्सूरया तेजो वारिमृदं यथा विनिमयो यत्र त्रिसर्गो मृषा धाम्ना स्वेन सदा निरस्तकुहकं सत्यं परं धीमहि धर्मप्रोज्झितकैकगोत्रपरमो निर्मत्सराणां सदा वेद्यं वास्तवमत्र वस्तु शिवदं तापत्रयोन्मूलनम् श्रीमद्भागवते महामुनिकृते ईश्वर सत्यो हृद्यवरुध्यते प्रकृतिः शुश्रूषुभिः तक्षणाम् निगमकल्पतरोर्गलितं फलं शुगमुखादमृतद्रवसंयुतं पिबत भागवतं रसमालयं मुहुरहो रसिका भुवि भावुकाः सच्चिदानन्दरूपाय विश्वोत्पत्त्यादिहेतवे तापत्रयविनाशाय श्रीकृष्णाय वयं नुमः यं प्रव्रजन्तं हनुवेदमवेदकृत्यं द्वैपायनो विरहकादरमाज्जुहाव पुत्रेति तन्मयदयत्तरवोभिनेदुक्तं सर्वभूतहृदयं मुनिम् आनतोऽस्मि यस्वानुभावमखिलश्रुतिसारमेकम् अध्यात्मदीपमतिदिदीर्षदां तमोन्धं संसारिणां करुणयाः पुराणगुह्यं तं व्याससूनुमुपयामि गुरुं मुनीनाम् नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् कमनीय किशोरमुग्धमूर्ते कलवेणुपुणिदादुदाननेन्दोः मम वाचि विजृम्भदां मुरारे मधुरिम्ना कणिकाभिगाभिगाभि नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिने नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशधारिणे श्रीमते गुरुचरणारविन्दाभ्यां नमः वन्दे नन्दव्रजस्त्रीणां पादरेणुमभीष्णश यासां हरिगतोद्गीतं पुनादि भुवनत्रयं गोपीचरणारविन्दपरमानवे नमः पीताम्बरं करविराजितचक्रशङ्खं कौमोदरी सरसिजं करुणासमुद्रं राधासहायमतिसुन्दरमन्दहासं वातालयेशमनिशं दिभावयामि कोमलं कूजयन् वेणुं श्यामणोऽयं कुमारका वेदवेद्यपरं ब्रह्म वासदां पुरतो मम मोघं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीकृष्णाय नमः श्रीराजाय नमः सर्वत्र गोविन्दनाम संकीर्तनं गोविन्द गोविन्द So, where we stopped last Sunday, the important thing what we talked about was that the material body's birth, what we give importance to, from the way Vedantam looks at it, or Ekadasaskandam says, that this body has its time of birth as calculated by the astrologers, as we said. That who is taking birth? This is the question, isn't it? Whose birth is that? Is the birth of the body or the birth of the soul? Krishna says in the Bhagavatam, in the Bhagavad Gita, that na jayate, the soul has no birth. Soul has no death either, isn't it? Na jayate mriyate va kadachil nayam bhutva bhagido vanamuya ajo nityam shashwadam puranam na hanyade hanyamani sharire. So, if you look into the second chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna first says that the najayate namriyate, the thing, the person, the individual soul inside the body, it has no birth nor death. And soon after that, and that is the truth, what Krishna has spoken there, there is nothing which takes birth here, nothing faces death in this world. Immediately after saying that, Krishna says, Vasamsi jirna yatha vihaya navani gurnadi naroparani tatha sharirani vihaya jirna anyadi samyani navani dehi. So, when you read those two verses together, you may misunderstand. It is completely contradicting each other, these two verses. If you look into Bhagavad Gita, you will see there that these two verses in the Bhagavad Gita, first Krishna talks that there is no such thing as birth or death. And immediately after that, Krishna says, this is in the second chapter, Krishna says that the soul, for the soul there is never birth nor death, first thing. Nor having once been, does he ever cease to be. He is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, undying and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. That is that verse. Na jayadem yade va kadajil nayam bhutva bhavido vanagriya. Ajaha nityaha shashwataha puranaha na hanyade hanyamane shariri. So in that particular verse, Krishna says, there is never birth, for the soul there is never birth or death, nor having once been does he ever cease to be. He is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, undying and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. Immediately after that, Krishna says in two verses later, Vasamsi jirnai yatha vihaya navani gurnadi naroparani tatha sharirani vihaya jirna anyani samyadi navani dehi. As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, similarly the soul accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. So, in the earlier verse, Krishna says that his soul there is never birth nor death. And in this verse, Krishna says, as a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, similarly the soul accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. So, when we read through these two verses, that first Krishna says there is no such thing as birth or death. Na jayate, na mriyate. And then Krishna is saying here that Dehi means the soul, leaves this body and move on to another body. Isn't it? Just like in the second verse, Krishna says, Vasamsi jirnai yatho vihaya navani gurnadi narovarani tatha sharirani vihaya jirna anyadi samyadi navani dehi. So, who is Dehi? That question will come. And if you inquire, who has got this Deham? Deham means the material body. Dehi means the soul, who is the owner of the body. If you ask that question, if you inquire about that, who has got this rebirth? Who has got the rebirth? Basically what Krishna is saying there is, one who has realized the truth, one who has self-realized, for him there is no such thing as birth or death. He has no birth or death. So long as you have not realized the truth, we haven't realized our identity as spirit soul, still then we will have birth and death. So what is important here is that the birth and death is for the body, not for the soul. Soul, as soon as you come, it is the ignorance which is in the subtle body that makes us to accept. So when Krishna says Vasamsi jirnai yatha vihaya navani gurnadi naroparani tatha sharirani vihaya jirna anyani samyani navani dehi, that there the point we have to understand is that the change of body, what we talk about, is nothing to do with the soul. Nothing to do with the soul. From the realized state, the soul has no rebirth. People ask this question all the time. Do you believe in rebirth, or do you believe in transmigration of the soul? They ask this question, isn't it? But what we have to understand is, when we explain this to people, we have to make them understand that the rebirth is for the body, not for the soul. So long as the self-realization hasn't happened, as we are on the identity with the body, yes, there is rebirth. There is rebirth. The moment the self-realization happens and our identity with the soul is established, then there is no such thing called rebirth or death after that. So, till we realize the soul, till we realize the truth, what our real identity is, we have to as long as you realize the truth, that our identity as the soul, then there is no more rebirth after that. So, so therefore, when self-realization happens for such a person, whether he will live in future, whether he will die, whether he will take birth again, what will happen after taking birth, all these things does not disturb him. This does not disturb him anymore. That is why Krishna says that in that verse that Agimsanas Mayarpidalpanas Sabhinarabekshasya Sarvadaha Mayalpana Sukham Yatal Kadasva Dushayalpanam Abunarbhavam. Krishna mentions there Na Yoga Siddhi Abunarbhavam. Even the same verse what was spoken by Utrasura. He said there in the verse 14 Na Parameshtyam Na Mahendra Dishyam Na Sarvabhaumam Na Rasadhivatyam Na Yoga Siddhi Abunarbhavam Mayarpidalme Charimadvinanyal. We have to understand that verse in this particular way. He says here, Na Yoga Siddhi Abunarbhavam Va Abunarbhavam Va Mayarpidalme Charimadvinanyal. So, one who is established in the self, or one who has taken complete shelter of Krishna, for he does not know anything else except that the truth, what is the self-realized platform. So, for them, for those who are realized, for them the only truth is Krishna. Only truth is Krishna, the soul. The soul is the only Madvinana Anyat. And for them, nothing else is truth in this world. So, if such a person exists in this world, Krishna is saying there, for that personality, everything I am willing to do for him. Because that personality who has realized the truth in that way, and he is non-different from Krishna. His presence in this world is so important. Krishna is saying there that he is willing to do anything for him in this world. And that is what Krishna says in the next verse. Na tathame priyadama alpayo nirna shankaraha najas sangarshanam shri naival mahajayadha bhavan. So, in the earlier verse, in the verse 14, Krishna spoke about Na parameshtam, na mahindradishtam, na sarvabhaumam, na rasadhivatyam, na yoga siddhi, ramanabhavamma, mayarpidalmechari madhunanyan. A person who has come to the platform of self-realization, who has realized the truth, for him, there is none of these things are important for him. Which one? Parameshtam, mahindradishtam, the ownership of the Brahmaloka or the heavenly planets, or emperor of the world, or emperor of the Rasadal planet, or any yoga siddhi, yogic powers, or Abunarbhavamva. Even if he comes to understand that, he has to take rebirth. They are Mayarpidalme Chari Madhinanyat. That for him, Krishna considers that he has already released from the cycle of birth and death. So such a person, Krishna says, he is very dear to Krishna. That person who has come to that stage is very, very dear to Krishna. That is why he says here, Na tadame priyadama alpayonirna shankara najana sangarshanam na shri naival maja yadha bhavan. So, Krishna asked this question to Uddhava. Uddhava, a first-class devotee who has reached that state of consciousness, how dear he is to me. Krishna says there. This Alpayoni means Lord Brahma. Brahma, and from Brahma, Brahma was born from Krishna's navel, isn't it? Krishna's navel. And that Brahma is not so dear to me. Not so dear to me. Alpayoni Brahma putrobi na tadha priyadamaha. Brahma, Sri Rajari Swami says there that Alpayoni Brahma putrobi, Alpayoni, he was born from Krishna's body, isn't it? Through the lotus, through the stem of the lotus flower, he was born from there. Brahma was born from there. And Brahma is not putrobi na dhada priyadamaha. And he is not dear to us. Shangaraha bal surupa bhutobi shangaraha. And Brahma is not so dear to me, nor, Krishna is saying there, Brahma is not so dear to me, nor na dhada priyadamaha. Lakshmi Devi is not so dear to me. Rukmini is also not so dear to me. Krishna saying. And then Mat Shankara, Mat Swarupa Bhudovi Shankara. Lord Shiva, who is me in another form, Shankara, Mat Swarupa. My own Swarupa is Shankara. Shiva is not different from me. And he is also not so dear to me. Then he says, Sankarshano Bhudovi. That among others, Balaram, Sankarshana, he is Bradha. He said, Bradha is his brother. Bradha is not dear to me. Just like in Vaishnava tradition, we have Sankarshana Murti, isn't it? Sankarshana Murti is Lord Balaram in the Vaishnava tradition. Similarly, in the Shaiva tradition also, they have Dakshinamurti, who is a transformation of Sankarshana Murti in another form. If you want to understand this, if you look into Srimad Bhagavatam in the 5th canto, you will see there that Lord Shiva and Lord Balaram are not different. This may be a little difficult to understand, because if you, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, while talking about in the 5th canto, you will see there that Krishna says there, 25th, in the 25th chapter, in the 5th canto says, Yasa Hawaivan Kaleno Vasanjihirshado Amarsha Vijiram Brahmat Goro Bhruvo Andarena Sangarshano Nama Rudra Ekadasha Vihatrakshastrishagam Shulam Uttambain Uttadishtan. That when Sankarshamurti, Lord Balaram, from his anger appears Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva appears from him, from Sankarshamurti. So Sankarshamurti and Lord Shiva are non-different. Or in other words, Lord Balaram and Lord Shiva are non-different. This is the Bhagavata philosophy. Bhagavata principle is Lord Balaram is non-different from Lord Shiva. So it says here that in every tradition you will see like this, that the Balaram, who is Sankarshamurti in Vaishnava tradition, comes as Dakshinamurti in the Shaiva tradition. Comes as Dakshinamurti in the Shaiva tradition, Shaiva Sampradayam. So whichever Sampradayam you talk about, it does not matter, that essentially there are certain things which you can't change. In the form they appear in a particular tradition, just like Dakshinamurti form in the Shaiva tradition and Balaram's form in the Vaishnava tradition, they are not different. You will see this particularly in the Buddhist tradition also. After Buddha became realized, self-realized, and he talked about Nirvana, realization, self-realization and all that. Ultimately, after his time, in the Bauddha tradition also, Vishnu, Brahma, Shiva, another form it appeared in them. It appeared in their tradition also, in the Buddhist tradition. Just like if you see in the Tibetan Buddhism, it is very interesting that Buddha, who discarded the appearance of Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, all the three different forms, immediately after Buddha's disappearance, the Buddhism turned in a different direction and they started accepting the appearance of all these three different forms in another name. They gave the name as Padma Sambhava, Ratna Sambhava and things like that. They gave the name to the same forms. So this form, worship of a particular form, where did they come from? Where did they originate from? It originates from within us. Because in our spiritual relationships, Adhyalpa Bhavam, it is called Adhyalpa Bhavam, it will come out in some form we will require for our acceptance inside, Then, strictly speaking, every thoughts or every emotions in us has a form as well. As a form it will take. So, particularly spiritual path, which is extremely subtle form, then many of our emotions will manifest in different forms. In the Upanishads, it's called Purusha Vidhatvam. That is a word used in the Upanishads. Purusha Vidhatvam. Purusha Vidhatvam means that different emotions in us will take up different forms in front of us. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, these different forms has come from within us. It has taken that form in that way. So, in order for us to feel a completeness within, we require a form which is similar to ours. So, even while we are in this bodily level, bodily concept, particularly we have got legs, hands, senses, and mind, intelligence and everything. And we will expect that God has a similar form, who has, of course, completely invested with all knowledge, renunciation and everything, but corresponding to our form in this world. If you deny that form, existence of a form to anybody, he will create another form. He will create another form. It is impossible for us, while within this body, to accept a state where there is no bodily identity. We can only relate with another form. That is our difficulty. That is why when we talk about self-realization, automatically bhakti process encourages people, because of the form of Krishna, immediately you can relate with Krishna in that way. Immediately you can relate with Krishna in that way. It's a very interesting topic in the Srimad Bhagavatam, this appearance and disappearance of different forms. So, suppose if we do not have any form, naturally our attraction will go to other processes like cinemas and other things, where we will identify, or even in politics, we will identify with someone and we will start following them. This is our present state. Saguna form it is called. Saguna means that something like similar to our existence we require for worship. Because every form has its own emotions, and accordingly a Purusha Tattvam. Upanishad calls it as Purusha Tattvam, he will create. So therefore, everyone requires some external form, appearance in front of him, to whom he can create a feeling of reverence and also some relationship with him. But this will only happen till we realize the truth, realize the self. The self by nature is Nitya Shuddha Buddha Mukta Sarupam. It is eternal, it is pure, and it is fully conscious, and it is always liberated. But that is the nature of the living force inside. That's the nature of the living force inside. So, Sankrishna Murti or Lord Balaram, in the Vaishnava tradition, he is the embodiment of knowledge. And Krishna is saying here that Sankrishna Murti is not so dear to me. And with a little bit of care, he says, Na Shrihi, even Lakshmi Devi is not so dear to me. And because Uddhava's love for Krishna is so high, he says here, I do not feel the same relationship what I feel towards you, Uddhava, towards Lakshmi. Same, I do not feel the same with Lakshmi Devi. Naivalma Jayadhava Bhavan. So, how much I love myself, I love Uddhava more than how much I love me. This was Krishna's words to Uddhava. So, in this way, Krishna has made Uddhava as a representative of all the devotees. Ekanath Swami, who wrote the commentary on Ekadasha Skandam of Srimad Bhagavatam, he says there that Krishna takes his four-handed form when Krishna falls into a loving relationship with someone. When pleased with someone, Krishna says he takes the four-handed form. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, in two occasions you can see when Krishna appeared in the four-handed form in front of the devotee. When Ashwatthama was killed, when Ashwatthama sent the Brahmastram to kill Parikshit Maharaj, while Parikshit was in the womb of Uttaradevi, Krishna sensed the danger and saved Parikshit from there. At that time, Krishna and Arjuna went searching for Ashwatthama. After finding Ashwatthama, they managed to pin him down and tied his hands and brought him in front of Draupadi, because Ashwatthama has killed all children of Draupadi before, isn't it? All the children of Draupadi were killed by Ashwatthama. So Draupadi was in a very revengeful mood. All the Pandavas were very upset with that incident. This happened after the Mahabharata war. So when the children were killed, that day Arjuna took a vow that whoever has killed the children, I will bring his head here and sit on his head and perform the Udaka Kriya. Udaka Kriya means the final rites for that soul, whoever has done this. And it is in that state that Krishna and Arjuna went looking for Ashwatthama. Ashwatthama was caught and they tied his hands and brought him back in front of Draupadi. When they brought him back in front of Draupadi, Bhimasena wanted to kill Ashwatthama straight away. But Krishna stopped him from doing so. And Draupadi at that time, although initially she responded very strongly against Ashwatthama, later on she felt, after all, Ashwatthama is our teacher's son, Dronacharya's son, isn't it? And because he is Dronacharya's son, he requires to be treated with respect. The other thing, what Draupadi said at that time was, my children are dead, Ashwatthama has killed them. But if we kill Ashwatthama, Kripi, Ashwatthama's mother, he is the only child. Ashwatthama is the only son of Kripi. She will also feel the same distress like the way I feel. This was Draupadi's words. Hearing this, Krishna spoke to Arjuna to deal with the situation, and then Arjuna cut off the hair and beard, everything, and made him look very ugly and sent him away from there, not to come back again. So at that point, it says there in the Bhagavatam, Draupadiascha chadur bhujaha. In front of Draupadi, Krishna appeared in the four-handed form. So Eknath Swami mentions in the Srimad Bhagavatam commentary that when Krishna is pleased with someone, he will appear in the four-handed form. So many instances you can see in the Bhagavatam also. From some devotees, Krishna appeared in the four-handed form. Some devotees, Krishna appeared in the eight-handed form also, like in front of Gajendra and others. So whatever it may be, another instance in the Srimad Bhagavatam you will see, when Rukmini Devi and Krishna had a quarrel once, isn't it? If you look in the 10th canto, you will see the 60th chapter, Karhijit chapter it is called. Karhijil Sukhamasinam. That one day Krishna felt the necessity to tease Rukmini. That relationship, they got married, and Krishna stole Rukmini, kidnapped Rukmini in the assembly of so many great personalities like Shishubala, Jarasandha, Dandavakra and so many others, and brought Rukmini and married Rukmini. And from that marriage, Pradyumna was born, and Pradyumna had got married, and Aniruddha was born from there. So Krishna had his son and the grandson. And after all this, one day, after, that means Krishna is a grandfather now. And it is then that one day Krishna speaks to Rukmini that why did you marry me? What qualification do I have for you to marry me? This was the question Krishna raised in front of Rukmini. If you look into Bhagavatam in the 60th chapter, you will see there that the Rukmini Devi's prayers, Rukmini Devi is talking to Krishna about that. He says there that Krishna spoke to Rukmini that Karhijal Sukhamasinam Sodalpastam Jagadgurum Padim Pajajarad Bhashmi Vajanena Sakhi Janehim. That Krishna wanted to have a conversation with Rukmini, and Krishna started asking very unusual questions. This question, why you have married me, is coming after the grandson is born. So Rukmini was actually very shaken when this question came up. After marriage, in the first or second year, if you ask such a question, it has some meaning, isn't it? But after marriage, the son was born, grandson is born, and then the husband is asking the wife, why did you marry me? So what is the answer? What answer can you give? So that's why it says there, in the Aspashtavarpanam Bhumsam Alokhapadami Yusham Astida Padavim Subhru Prayasidan Yoshidaham. Krishna is talking about how he is not qualified to marry Rukmini.
That is how Krishna begins. First he says, from all, marriage should normally happen from people of a similar status in the society. Look at me, Krishna says, I was born in Gokulam. I was born in a family of cowherdmen. And basically I am a shepherd, in other words. Whereas you, says to Rukmini, you are a princess born in one of the most royal families, Vidarbha, king of Vidarbha. In that family you were born. So there is no match between us. And if you take into Nishkinjana vayam shashvat Nishkinjana jana prayaha tasman prayena nahyadhya mam bhajanti sumadhyame. So normally because our background, family background is not so good, Krishna says. So therefore most of the people, our friends, relatives, they are not very aristocratic, just like your family is. Krishna is saying this to Rukmini. Rukmini's family, Krishna says, one of the aristocratic families, royal family, princess family. How can there be a relationship between Rukmini's family and my family? Krishna is asking this question. Then the next thing he says, Nishkinjana vayam shashval Nishkinjana jana prayaha tasman prayena nahyadhya mam bhajanti sumadhyame. Krishna says to Rukmini, my friends are all these men with long beard. They are most of the time they are begging. That's my associates. Krishna refers to all the sages. They come to see me all the time and they come and they glorify me and I sit there and listen to them and then they go. These are my associates. Whereas for you, you come from such a family, very, very highly, very rich and wealthy people, a princess like Shishubala, Dandavakra, they are all your relationships. They are all your relationships. But whereas my birth and my friends are of these characters, who are, most of them don't have any wealth. Nishkinjanas they have no wealth. Nishkinjana vayam shashval Nishkinjana jana prayaha. And I love them because they have nothing. They haven't got anything, so I like them. And they also like me because they come and see me often. And tasman prayena nahyadhyam ma bhajanti sumadhyame. Ye ralma samamitam janma ishwariyagadir bhavaha tayor vivaho maitrija motama athamayo kochil. So therefore, my opinion is that if you look at it from the point of wealth or birth or beauty or any other way, we are not a match at all. Neither your background and my background are so different. We don't form a proper match. And you had so many princes who wanted to marry you. Namely, he said that Shishubala, Salva, Jarasandha, Dandavakra, all of them, they all wanted to marry you. And not only that, they are all friends of your brother Rukmini. And they all don't like me either. None of them like me. They won't accept me as a king. They won't accept me as an equal with them. All of them think that I'm just one of those cowherd boys from Vrindavan. So there is practically no relationship between us. In spite of all that, why did you marry me? This was the question Krishna is asking to Rukmini. And other thing he mentions here is that Udasino vayam nonam tatra patyarthaka mugaha alpalabhyasmahe purna gehayor jyotirakriyaha. It says here, we people, our nature, Krishna is talking about his family. He says here, we by nature, we are not much interested in the wealth and family life and children and all that. And basically we are indifferent to all of that. And we are satisfied in our own spiritual position, spiritual existence. So when Krishna said this to Rukmini, Rukmini was completely confused. Rukmini started thinking that why is at this point this issue has been raised. So Krishna thought that Rukmini in return will start glorifying Krishna. That was what going through Krishna's mind. But instead what happened was, Rukmini completely collapsed at that point, hearing what Krishna has spoken. There is a reason behind it. In the previous appearance, when Ramachandra appeared, Ramachandra one day took Sita Devi away to the forest and left there. From that, Sita Devi has come here as Rukmini now, and Ramchandra has come as Krishna. So when Rukmini heard this question from Krishna, immediately Rukmini's mind went up in this way, thought about what happened in the previous life when she was Sita Devi. So Rukmini thought, is Krishna going to abandon me again? It is that thought that made Rukmini fully upset, and she collapsed and fell down. She collapsed and fell down. Just like they say, the example is given that just like the banana plant, when there is very strong wind, suddenly the banana plant falls down because of the strong wind. Rukmini fell in that way. Bhagavatam says like that. So at that time, Rukmini started speaking in answer to Krishna's questions. It is some of the finest prayers in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Rukmini's glorification of Krishna in the Karhijit chapter, in this 68th chapter. There you will notice Rukmini, when she fell, Krishna immediately changed into a four-handed form. And with that four hands, Krishna lifted Rukmini. So, Ekanath Swami says there that when Krishna is pleased with someone, Krishna immediately changes the form into a four-handed form. And because Krishna feels that two hands are not enough to show his love for the devotee. Therefore, one devotee told Krishna, when you come in front of me, why do you come with conch shell, disc, lotus flower, club and everything? This was the devotee's question. Am I a demon? He said to Krishna. If I am a demon, yes, you need the club, you need the disc and other things. But am I a demon? Why don't you come in front of me in your two-handed form? The devotee asked Krishna. So Krishna is saying here, Ekanath Swami says here in the Bhagavatam commentary that when Krishna appeared in front of Rukmini Devi, when Krishna felt compassion for Rukmini after hearing the reply from Rukmini, you have to read those verses in the Bhagavatam where Rukmini answers Krishna, and it is the principle is that Rukmini is considered to be Jiva, and Jiva's relationship with Ishvara, how it wants to go back to Ishvara, all those thoughts are reflected in those verses in the prayers from Rukmini. So here Krishna heard Rukmini's answer. After hearing that, Krishna felt an immense love feeling for Rukmini. At that time Krishna took up the four-handed form. In the Bhagavatam it says there. In another instance, when Paundraga Vasudev came to Krishna, asking him to surrender to him, Krishna appeared there also. At that time, Krishna had to send the Sudarshana disc to kill Paundraga Vasudev. You will see that in the Bhagavatam later. So Krishna says here, I am not even captivated or attracted by Sankarshanamurti, means Lord Balaram, nor by Lord Brahma, nor by Lord Shiva, or by Lakshmi Devi, not even myself. Krishna says, that much love I have for you. This mood of Krishna, from this you can understand, this mood, this suddenly, when Krishna is replying to Uddhava, suddenly this verse appears there. What is that verse? Na tadha me priyadama almayo nirna shankaraha najas sangarshano nashri naivalma chayatha bhavan. Krishna spoke several things before that, and instantaneously this verse came out from Krishna. The commentators on Srimad Bhagavatam says there that when spiritual knowledge is transmitted from the spiritual master to the disciple, at a particular point in that process, when the spiritual master places immense feeling or compassion for the disciple, he swallows the disciple. He completely absorbs him with his love, and it is at that point that when that happens, that this spiritual knowledge gets transmitted to the disciple. It gets to the disciple. So, at that time in the relationship between Uddhava and Krishna, you can notice this very clearly here. That Uddhava, Krishna started instructing Uddhava, Ekadasha Skandam from the 7th chapter. Now we are talking on the 14th chapter. Uddhava has been asking questions and Krishna has been answering them. So when this point came, especially while talking about bhakti, it came to a stage when Krishna could not resist himself. It is at that stage that Krishna wanted Uddhava to realize the truth, and that realization happened to Uddhava at that point. That is why that verse is so important. That Uddhava experienced immediately at that point the realization of what Krishna wanted Uddhava to realize. It has happened at that point. Because it is the particular state when Krishna is showing his complete happiness in Uddhava. Or a disciple, when he feels he is blessed by the spiritual master in that way. That means spiritual master's, Krishna's mercy is coming through the spiritual master to the disciple. Of course here, Krishna is a spiritual master himself. In order to teach us this lesson, that is why that verse has been put in. The spiritual master-disciple relationship is not mundane. It's not a mundane relationship. We make it a mundane relationship because that is how we are. But spiritual master and the disciple relationship is a transcendental relationship in the sense that it is not based on any rituals or any other activity. It is a connection between the two souls, between the spiritual master who is instructing him on the highest knowledge of transcendental life, and the disciple, because of his submission and surrender to the spiritual master, completely pleasing the spiritual master, and in that process receiving the transcendental message through him. This is why this verse is important. Na tatha me priyatama alvayo nirna shankaraha najas sangarshanam shri naivalma jayatha bhavan. It is a very amazing statement from Krishna that Brahma is not so dear to me. Krishna is saying this to Uddhava. Brahma is not so dear to me. Balaram is not so dear to me. Lord Shiva is not so dear to me. Lakshmi Devi is not so dear to me. Even I am not dear to myself as much as you are dear to me. Imagine that statement to come from Krishna's face. When Krishna has to say this, what an amount of happiness Krishna must have experienced while instructing Uddhava. This is what we have to think about it. Uddhava's qualification is so high that somehow or the other, Uddhava has pleased Krishna to such an extent that this statement came from Krishna. This statement came from Krishna. Uddhava, when he went to, Uddhava was specially picked by Krishna to go and visit the gopis in Vrindavanam, isn't it? You know that story in the Bhagavatam 10th canto. When after Krishna left Vrindavanam, went to Mathura, and from Mathura, after a few days, Krishna sent Uddhava to inquire about the welfare of the gopis. At that time, Krishna told Uddhava, these devotees whom you are going to visit, they are a very special class of devotees. And he gave a lot of advice to Uddhava while meeting the gopis. And after returning from Vrindavanam to Mathura, Krishna was asking Uddhava what was his experience after visiting the gopis. Uddhava says, Evam bhaktya sakala bhuvane nekshida nashvadava kim shastra uge kimiha tavasa gopikabhyo namostu. Evam bhaktya sakala bhuvane. Seeing that devotion of gopis, Uddhava was very moved by the devotion of the gopis. He says, Evam bhaktya sakala bhuvane. That devotion of the gopis, such a devotion, I haven't seen in any of the three worlds, he says. Nekshida nashvadava. I have not seen nor I have heard about it. Kim shastra uge kimiha tavasa gopikabhyo namostu. What is the necessity to study any shastram? What is the necessity to perform any austerities or penances? I pay my full respectful obeisances to the gopis, saying that Uddhava fell flat on the ground and paid his respects to the gopis. This is Uddhava. And that Uddhava who know the secret of bhakti, what is bhakti means, and that Uddhava who associated with Krishna for 112 years in his life, almost 125 years they were of the same age, and that Uddhava is saying here that he is the most dear to Krishna than even Brahma, Balaram, Lord Shiva or Lakshmi Devi or anybody, and even himself. When Uddhava heard that, it is at that point that you can take it that Ekadasha Skandam, what Krishna wanted Uddhava to understand was flowing very freely to Uddhava's heart. Uddhava's realization was getting complete. In other words, self-realization has come to Uddhava, as it happened to Uddhava. So, it is only in that state when when that relationship between the spiritual master and the disciple is so pure, without any falsity in that relationship, without any expectation of results from that relationship, and also in a very free state, when the relationship is very pure, the knowledge will flow very freely from the heart of the spiritual master to the heart of the disciple. Heart of the spiritual master to the heart of the disciples. So not otherwise in an academic way. It cannot happen in an academic way. That is the most important thing. We have this misunderstanding that by performing a fire sacrifice or by performing a course or a seminar or things like that, just like if you study the books in the college, if you start studying Upanishads, nothing will happen. If you study Upanishads in that way, nothing will happen. Because you won't understand anything, except that you will hear some words like Alma, Brahma and things like that. Nothing else will happen. Nothing else will happen. If you look back into the history, in the life of almost all the great personalities, great acharyas and their great disciples, you will see at some point in time, between the spiritual master and the disciple, there would have been a very, very close relationship. This is an important thing in spiritual life to know. It's an important thing in spiritual life to know. At that point, it is not the qualification of the disciple that matters. It's not the qualification, how qualified he is. It is that mercy that flows from the spiritual master to the disciple. A self-realized spiritual master, and if one happens to be a disciple, and if that disciple receives that mercy from that great soul, automatically the disciple will receive that impact will be there in him. Impact will be there in him. To give you an example, in Shankaracharya's case, this is in all great acharyas' case, these incidences are there. Examples are there. In Shankaracharya's case, Ramanujacharyas, Madhvacharyas, all of them, they had great personalities as their disciples. And some of these disciples in the beginning, they were not that intelligent. Once it so happened, Shankaracharya was conducting, teaching in Sringeri, where Tungabhadra river flows. On the banks of the river Sringeri, on Tungabhadra river, there is their monastery there, Sringeri Mutt. And in Sringeri, he was teaching his disciples Upanishads. He was teaching Upanishads to his disciples. So, there was one disciple who was very surrendered to Acharya Swamiji, very, very surrendered personality. When classes started, one day when the classes started, he was on the banks of the river washing the clothes of his teacher, of the Acharya. He was washing his clothes. And Acharya Swamiji sat there and wanted to begin the classes. When he wanted to start the classes, at that time he looked around and he saw Giri was his name. The disciple's name was Giri, who was missing. He saw Giri hasn't come. Shall we wait till he comes? He said. At that time, one disciple who was in the group made a comment. What difference does it make? In other words, what he was saying was, Giri was considered to be a little bit backward in his capacity to understand the subtle things of Upanishads. Even if after explaining it many times, Giri found it very difficult to get the message across. Found it very hard to understand. Sometimes it is like that in spiritual life, isn't it? So many things we hear, but practically how much we understand from that, what we have to understand, is always not fully understood. So Giri was there, and Giri could not understand many things, so he was more busy with the service to his spiritual master. So Acharya Swamiji sat there and inquired and said, Giri hasn't turned up yet, he said. When this disciple who commented that Giri is, it makes no difference whether Giri is here or not. When Acharya Swamiji heard that, this comment from one of his disciples, immediately in his mind he felt an unusual compassion for Giri. Unusual compassion for Giri. After all, he is serving and he has the desire, but due to some unfortunate thing, he is being looked down by the other brahmacharis who were there, other disciples who were there. It was then that when Shankaracharya thought about his disciple in that way, immediately at the same time, who was washing the clothes in the river, suddenly realized the truth. And it is at that point he started singing and a famous prayer in glorification of his spiritual master, which is known as Todagashtakam. He was given the name as Todagacharya later. And then his prayers came about glorifying the spiritual master at that point, and he sings those prayers glorifying him. What he says there is Vidhita Gila Shastra Sudha Jalade Mahidopanishal Kathita Tanide Hridaye Kalaye Vimalam Charanam Bhava Shankara Deshigame Sharanam. 8 verses glorifying Acharya Swamiji. He came from the river singing these verses glorifying the Acharya. By now self-realization has happened to him. You can see here, just like when Krishna spoke to Uddhava, at a particular point, Krishna's feeling for Uddhava became to the peak. It peaked at that time, automatically self-realization happens to Uddhava. This is how it works. It's not an academic thing. That's what we have to understand. That when that relationship, the surrender is complete and the spiritual master feels that great message, that immense compassion for the disciple comes freely from the heart, the spiritual knowledge flows and self-realization happens. This is what has happened to many great devotees and jnanis also in the same way. So it depends on this that the knowledge, what we call as self-realization, when it happens by Krishna's mercy, it happens in this way. So this is what Acharya Swamiji calls it as Shraddha. And then from Shraddha, Bhakti comes, and from Bhakti, Dhyanam happens. He says here, Shraddha Bhakti Dhyana Yogadavehi. That seriousness in the disciple's heart, which is Shraddha, that will develop into bhakti towards the spiritual master, devotion to the spiritual master, and then that bhakti dhyanam or meditation comes. Because when one is seriously absorbed in the thoughts of the spiritual master or the Supreme Personality, Supreme Lord, Krishna, automatically bhakti will develop into dhyanam, isn't it? Bhakti will develop into dhyanam. If you remember, in this 14th chapter we are discussing Dhyana Yogam, isn't it? So why Dhyanam is important? Because it is from Bhakti that Dhyanam develops. Bhakti, Dhyanam develops. So first Krishna spoke about Shraddha, and from Shraddha Bhakti develops, and from Bhakti Dhyanam develops. From Bhakti Dhyanam develops. That's why it says here that Shraddha Bhakti Dhyana Yoga Damehi. Once one person has Shraddha, seriousness in spiritual life, then automatically Bhakti will develop in that person. Once Bhakti develops, Dhyanam will happen. Dhyanam means meditation will happen. Once Dhyanam happens, Shraddha Bhakti Dhyana Yoga Mumukshuho Muktar Hetu Iti Saksha Shruti. Shruti or Vedas are saying to us from Shraddha, Bhakti and Dhyanam, when that happens, Mumukshuho Muktir Hetu, if that person is fully ready for liberation, for him immediately he will become liberated. Mukti or liberation will happen to him. From Shraddha, Bhakti develops. From Bhakti, Dhyanam or meditation happens inside. And if that person is pure enough, Mumukshatvam is inside, or intense desire for liberation is in there, in that person, immediately he will become liberated from the material world. So Vedas are talking about it in that way, and he will become an advanced devotee. Saying that, Acharya Swamiji gave the name to Giri as Todaya, as Todagacharya. He was given this name. And similarly, you can see here, all of a sudden, Uddhava became the object of Krishna's mercy. Krishna's mercy. And you can also notice one thing. The sudden appearance of this mercy from Krishna, it has not much of a previous words what was spoken. Krishna was continuously instructing Uddhava, and suddenly while instructing, all of a sudden this immediate feeling for Uddhava happened in Krishna's heart. And while instructing, it was just like in a river there is a dam. Suddenly the dam broke and the water starts flowing intensely from how powerfully the water starts flowing. In the same way, suddenly from Krishna's heart, the intense feeling for Uddhava started flowing. And that is why all the verses after that, if you read, it is a continuation of this flow of love or flow of that compassion or mercy that's coming from Krishna to Uddhava. That you will see there. That some feeling inside in Krishna's mind, Krishna's heart for Uddhava. So without any particular reason at that moment, Krishna was not thinking, oh, I'm going to instruct Uddhava about the science of self-realization. It was not planned in that way. That's the point the Acharya is saying here. It was not at all planned in that way. Uddhava came and asked Krishna some questions, isn't it? Well, Uddhava came to know that Krishna was departing from this world. He mentioned to Krishna that, please take me with you. He said that, isn't it? So Krishna said, there is no need for me to take you back. You have to come on your own. This was the word Krishna told Uddhava. And Uddhava explained to Krishna that how much he is in distress due to the separation from Krishna. He spoke all that, isn't it? So, Kshanardam avigeshava tektum samulsahe nadha sodhamanayamavi. Please carry me with you to the spiritual world. Uddhava was saying to Krishna. So Krishna says to Uddhava, there is no need for me to take you. You can come on your own. And he started instructing Uddhava about the science of this transcendental life, transcendental knowledge. He was started instructing Uddhava from the 7th chapter onwards. But what you find in this 14th chapter is, all of a sudden, Krishna felt an intense feeling for Uddhava, and it broke everything and it started flowing very freely towards Uddhava without any special reasons. Here, with Uddhava, that is what has happened. That's what you find here. That Naiva, you are so dear to me, Krishna says there, isn't it? Na tadhamne priyanama almayoni na shankara na jas sangarshanam na shri naivalma cha yatha bhavan. That complete fullness in Krishna, fullness he is feeling. That complete satisfaction in Krishna's heart to deliver Uddhava from this material world. So when Krishna heard that, Uddhava says here that Uddhava heard all this. You will see the remaining verses which comes after that. He says here that the very next verse, it is one of the most famous verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Nirapeksham munim shandam nurvairam samadarshinam anubrajamyaham nityam poye tendri renuvi. After saying to Uddhava that You are so dear to me more than Balaram, Lord Shiva, Lakshmi Devi and even myself, Krishna says. You are so dear to me. Immediately after that, Krishna says to Uddhava, Niramayaksham munim shandam narvairam samadarshinam anubrajamyaham nityam puyeye tangrirenubhi. Very important verse. Krishna is saying there, when a devotee is free from desires, who he is not asking, more or less all these qualifications you will see in Uddhava. That is the interesting thing. All these qualifications Krishna is talking about, he is present in Uddhava. That's why he says, Niramayaksham munim shandam, always peaceful. Nurvairam samadarshinam. Uddhava has come to that state that he has no enmity towards anyone. Only if when one's mind is freedom from attachment and aversion, you will feel the desire to develop spiritual life. You will feel the desire to develop spiritual life. That is this example showing to us. There were so many people present in the Dwaraka. None of them felt asking any questions, serious questions about spiritual life to Krishna. Only Uddhava felt the need, isn't it? Just to show to us that how pure Uddhava was. How pure Uddhava was. So, Nurvairam Samadarshinam, and that equal vision in Uddhava. Uddhava considered that the only life what he had in this world was simply to please Krishna. Anubrajamyaham nityam puyetyangrirenubhi. Such a person, Krishna says to Uddhava, I follow him. I follow him for what? Just to purify myself, Krishna says to Uddhava. So, for a first-class devotee, symptoms, after having spoken that, Krishna mentions this practically with reference to Uddhava. So, people ask this question, why do you follow such devotees in that way? Krishna says there, because they are so pure, I take the dust from their feet and put it on my head to purify myself. To purify myself. Now, when people read these verses, they start thinking, why is Krishna saying like this? Does Krishna require purification? This question will come, isn't it? When Krishna says that I follow those devotees and I take the dust from their feet to put it on my head to purify myself. This is the statement from Krishna. If we read this verse, we start thinking there's something wrong here. Why Krishna has to take because that's how we understand, isn't it? These verses are spoken only with one point behind it. Krishna is trying to explain to us how bhakti process works. How bhakti process works. Because Egadasa Skandam, particularly in this 14th chapter, is a discussion about bhakti, isn't it? How does bhakti happens to a person? Bhakti develops in the heart of a person. To show that Krishna himself puts in that situation as a devotee and showing to us that if I see a devotee of that nature, like Uddhava, who is free from any desires, who is always peaceful in Shanti state, who has no enemies in the world, and who is always seeing everything on an equal level, presence of the truth, or presence of the soul in every living entity, such a person, Krishna says, Anubrajami, I follow him and I take the dust from his feet. So, Krishna is showing to us, to the devotees, that the nature, this should be the mood of a devotee. This should be the mood of a devotee who wants to make freedom from the false ego. Devotee wants to give up one thing in his life. What is that? The ego inside, isn't it? He is trying to cultivate humility or freedom from false ego, but he is finding it very difficult to give it up. The devotee is finding it very difficult to give it up, isn't it? We all know, we run courses and seminars how to become humble, is it not? But when we come out of the course, we are still the same. We know very well that it is not good to be proud, it's not good to be egoistic. We want to get freedom from that. We want to come to the state where we do not feel enmity or attachment, aversion towards others. and also able to maintain that peaceful state inside. But it is not possible. It is not possible. Therefore, as a clue how to reach that state, this verse is spoken. This verse is spoken. You will see the same thing in two other instances in the Srimad Bhagavatam. When Jadabharata was instructing Rahugana, you remember that in the 5th canto, Jadabharata, the king, Jadabharata, the Bharata Maharaj, when he came as Jadabharata in his 3rd birth, he met Rahugana, and between Rahugana and Jadabharata there is a discussion. Rahugana was well learned, highly learned, but the same problem, unable to give up the ego from inside. Every one of us has got the problem. All of us know it is wrong to be proud, it's wrong to be egoistic, it is wrong to, it is important to have humility in life. But in spite of our desire, we find that difficult to give it up. We find it difficult to give it up. It comes back in some form. In some form it comes up again. So there, Rahugana, in spite of all his learning, Jadabharata told Rahugana, the only thing that you still have in God is this humility, which you will not get from the books nor from anywhere else, except what is mentioned there was that Rahugana tavasanayadi na chejaya nuvapanan grihadva na chandasa naiva jalamya suryo vina mahalpadarajo vishegam. Rahugana says to Rahugana, all the other things are fine. You can perform Rahugana tavasanayati. You can perform a lot of austerities and penances in the forest. Na chejaya nuvapanan grihadva, that you can conduct a lot of sacrifices, austerities, penances, sacrifices, and engage in all kinds of yoga systems, yoga practices. Also you can perform yamam, niyamam, asanam, pranayamam, pratyaharam, dharanam, ashtanga yogam. You can do all that very well. Na chandasa naiva jaladnya suryo. You can study all the Vedic literature and understand the importance of the Vedic hymns and chant them regularly. Na chandasa. And in addition to that, you can stand in the water and perform your penances, or stand in the middle of the fire and execute your penances there. Na chandasa naiva jaladnya suryo. You can do all these things, but you will not get the truth still. That is Rahugana's, Jadabharata's instructions to Rahugana. You still will not get that message inside. The self-realization will not happen. And it will only happen, he says, Vina mahalpadarajo vishegam. That when you serve the great souls, Mahalpas, Jnanis or great devotees, and you take the dust from their feet and put it on your head, you will realize the truth, he says. How can it be? That question will come, isn't it? So, this issue, devotees' main problem is this. All we engage in so many different activities to get this freedom from the ego, freedom from the pride, freedom from our false ego, what we have. And that is the greatest block in our advancement in spiritual life, particularly in the process of bhakti. Particularly in the process of bhakti. It is that comes as the block there. So it is in that connection, because it is talking about bhakti, Krishna is also saying here that if I see a devotee like that, I take the dust from his feet and put it on my head. In other words, Krishna is presenting himself as a first-class devotee. That is the secret behind that. Krishna is not doing this actually for his own purification. All the great sages, great personalities, they meditate on Krishna's form for purification. But here, Krishna is saying, I get purified. In other words, as a devotee, Krishna says, the only option you have, if you want to rid off that ego from inside, is just to surrender to the great soul. Surrender to any great soul. Any great soul. Simply by that total surrender alone, it can happen. Only by surrender, it can happen. This is the point. In other words, in bhakti process, the most important thing is the surrender. If there is no surrender, that bhakti will carry on for millions and millions of years. It won't come to any conclusion. It is the surrender that makes the bhakti perfect. Bhakti perfect. So that surrender is the point Krishna wants to bring about. That is why you see here, in one or two occasions you will notice this, that the Prahlada also says this in the Bhagavatam. If you look, you will see there that Prahlada talking about it, he says, Naisham madistavadurukkramangim spashatanarthapagamo yadartaha mahiyasam padarejo vishegam nishkinjananam navranitayavad. Then Naisham madistavadurukkramangim, one who is struggling in this material world, with this material body, mind, senses, everything, and one who is completely absorbed in that, for them to get this attention into the spiritual world, to the spiritual life, and it will not happen very easily. It will not happen very easily. Attraction towards the spiritual master, attraction towards Krishna. These things won't happen very easily. Prahlada says here, why? Mahiyasam padarejo vishegam nishkinjananam navranitayavar. That when that surrender happens in him, that it is at that point that mercy comes from the Mahatma in such a way that he gets that mercy and he will understand that message properly. So, studying Vedic literature, or standing in the water and executing the penances, or worshipping the sun planet, standing in the fire, none of them can bring this, can solve this problem of ego or the pride inside. And that's why devotee is always thinking about it, how to get rid of this ego inside. And Vina Mahalpada Rajobhishekam. So, how to get this mercy from the Mahatma? So, this question has come up later. Later in the Bhagavatam itself you will see. Bhagavatam. Later on, Uddhava asked this question. Uddhava heard everything from Krishna. This 14th chapter, then after that many chapters. The chapter related to Sankhya, also about the three modes of material nature. Everything Uddhava heard from Krishna. 28 chapters Krishna heard from, Uddhava heard from Krishna. And after that, still this one question remained in Uddhava's heart. How to get out of this ego inside. So Krishna was seeing this situation in Uddhava. And Krishna says to Uddhava, Uddhava, all this I have spoken. If you cannot get to that stage, there is only one option that is left. What is that? Praname dandavad bhuvam ashva chandala khokharam. The Bhagavatam you will see later, that statement. Praname dandavad bhuvam ashva chandala khokharam. It is in the 29th chapter. Krishna says there that, that if you are finding Uddhava difficult to take that, make that surrender to anybody, to rid of that ego from inside, he says here, Brahmane pulkase sthene, Brahmanyarke spulingage, akrure krurage jaiva samadak pandito madaha. Nareshwa vishnam malbhavam punso bhavayado ajiral spardha asuya tiraskaram sahangara niyandihi. Visrajya smayamanam swan drisham pridam chadehim pranave dandavad bhumam ashva chandala khokharam. This is Krishna's words to Uddhava. So Uddhava, just before left for Badrinath, Krishna says finally to Uddhava, Uddhava, if none of these things are practical for you, I'll give you one very easy method, easy process, whereby you can get rid of this ego from inside. You can get rid of the ego from inside. So, it is at that stage that Krishna started telling Uddhava, Brahmane pulkase sthene. Stene Brahmanyake Spulingage. That the realized soul is that person who sees in the Brahmane, Pulkasa is the Brahmana, advanced Brahmana, or a Pulkasa, one who has born among the Pulkasa race or in the lowest races. Brahmane Arke Spulingage. And in the sun, in this spark of a fire, and everywhere, and in all conditions, wherever akure kurege jaiva samadar pandidomara. No matter who it is, whether he is a thief, whether he is a brahmana, whether he is a chandala, no matter what it is, in all living entities, when one sees the spiritual spark inside, or with equal vision he sees, that person, Krishna says, will be free from ego. Will be free from ego. Nareshu Vishnam Malbhavam Pumso Bhavayato Achiral Spardha Asuya Tiraskaram Sahangara Viyandihi. He says there, those people who have normally in our relationship with others, there are 4 stages. Spardha, Asuya, Tiraskaram, Ahangaram. Isn't it? Spardha. Spardha means what? Spardha is towards equals. We create spardha. We compete with others, isn't it? That is spardha. Towards equal, we have spardha. In the material life, that is how it is. When I say material life, whether it is a material life or a spiritual life, doesn't matter. These qualifications are important. That is why I say, it's said like this. Spardha means a nature of competing with others all the time. You have to be one higher than the next person. So this competing nature, spardha, or asuya. Asuya means envious of someone who is superior to you. Envious who is superior to us. Asuya. Spardha, asuya. Or tiraskara. Tiraskara means one who is lower than us. We feeling a kind of looking up, down them, upon them. Not looking at them in a proper way. Thinking of them as lower in that way. Looking down upon them. Spardha, asuya, tiraskara. And above all these things, the 4th one is ahangara, the false ego inside. Krishna says here, Nareshu Vishnam Malbhavam Pumso Bhavedo Achiral Spardha Asuya Tiraskaram Sayangara Viyandihi. So, one who is managed to wipe out these 4 things from inside. Spardha, Asuya, Tiraskaram, Ahangaram. All these 4 things inside. He is a learned person, Krishna says. In other words, he is a realized soul. And he says here, Visrujya Smayamanan Drisham Vedam Cha Dehigim Praname Dandavad Bhumam Ashwachandala Ghokharam. This is the secret of that. When we see another person from a bodily level, automatically these 4 things will, from a subtle level, it will develop within us. It will develop within us from a subtle level. That's the important thing. Only when you see another material body, doesn't matter who it is, one of these 4 things will naturally sprout inside. Spardha, Asuya, Tiraskaram, Ahangara. 4 things. Either we have a competition with him, or we are envious of him, or we feel some kind of indifference towards him, or the false ego inside dictating something else. Spardha, Asuya, Tiraskaram, Ahangara. Krishna is saying here, Visrujya Smayamanansan Drisham Vridam Cha Dehigim. It is impossible to come out of it so long as we are in a material body. This is the difficulty. We are in a material body, and when we relate with another material body in one of these 4 levels, this problem does exist. This problem doesn't exist. When such a situation happens, Krishna says, first thing is to come out of that. Because this is through the body you are connecting with that person, isn't it? Therefore, first pay your obeisances to that person, fully flat on the ground. Praname Dandavad Bhumam Ashwachandala Ghokharam. That just like a rod, you fall on the ground, whether he is Dandavad Bhumam Ashwachandala Ghokharam. Now, when we talk about this, you have to remember, Krishna is saying that, asking us to pay obeisances to a dog, to a cat, to a donkey, and to a cow, or to a horse, or even to a learned person or someone who is your enemy. Doesn't matter who it is. Praname dandaval bhumam ashvachandala khokharam. This is the way, Krishna says, this is the only way you can come out of these 4 problems inside. 4 problems inside. So, coming back to this, Praname dandaval bhumam ashvachandala khokharam. So, Krishna says, don't wander around in the world looking where is that Mahatma where I can go and place him. You don't have to do that. This is the most important thing. When we read these verses, you think, when you say Vina Mahatpada Rajobhishekam, that is the first instruction, isn't it? Rahugana said that, Prahlada also said that. Vina Mahatpada Rajobhishekam. Krishna is also saying the same thing. So immediately the question will come, where will I find a Mahatma like that? Where I can go and place him and take the dust from his feet and put it on my head. All these doubts will naturally come. Quite often, people will inquire about it, don't they? They ask, where is the self-realized soul? Where can I go and find him? Where will I meet him? So that I could develop a relationship with him and please him somehow and get that self-realization in me. This question will come. Prahlada said that. Jadabharata also said that to Rahugana. And here you see Krishna also saying the same thing to Uddhava. But immediately after saying that, Krishna is saying that Uddhava, actually it is not necessary to go around all over the world looking for a person like that. It's not necessary. Why? If you have bhakti inside, and that bhakti can only develop if you have this relationship with all other living entities. That means while seeing a dog or a cat or another animal like a horse or a donkey or whatever it is, or if you are seeing anyone, even an enemy, whom you don't have any feelings or whom you feel don't even like your inside, like him, even then, Praname dandaval bhumam ashvachandala khokharam, fall on the ground and pay your obeisances to him, thinking that it is Krishna who is present in that body. That is the easiest way, Krishna says, to come out of this predicament. How to get rid of the ego from inside. There is no other shortcut. There is no other shortcut. We can keep on talking about it, but the ego will not go away, Krishna says, till we come to that point. And that is why Krishna mentions here that first start paying obeisances to everybody, without thinking whether that person is qualified or not. That is Krishna's point. Without thinking that person is qualified or not, pay your obeisances to him. Krishna says, of course, if you start paying obeisances to your dog, dog won't understand. Dog is not going to understand. But you have to remember, even while paying your obeisances to the dog, you are actually paying obeisances to Krishna who is present in that dog's body. Krishna is present in the dog's body. So if we recognize that and pay your obeisances, you are not paying obeisances to that external dog's body, rather to the presence of that one. If we practice it, Krishna says, eventually that bhakti will lead into the same state what Krishna spoke before, that mahiyasam padarajobhishekam. So, in order that in the devotional process, bhakti process, surrender is the important key behind it, isn't it? So, if that is the only process, Krishna says, how to make our false ego bring it down, how to bring it down to a minimum level, to bring it down to the minimum level. Otherwise, what will happen is, from a very subtle platform, it will keep on creating problem for us in our inside, and it will create a lot of trouble inside. So, wherever possible, in all those places, pay your obeisances. That is why Krishna says there in that verse, that when I see such devotees, I take the dust from their feet and put it on my head. This is the reason behind it. In other words, to tell us that in bhakti process, false ego cannot exist. Bhakti and ego won't go together. Bhakti and ego cannot go together. The ahankaram or pride or ego, that has to totally disappear in bhakti process. Whole bhakti secret is that. Bhakti is not based on knowledge, bhakti is based on surrender, sharanagati, isn't it? So that is the reason normally people wants to avoid, isn't it? Everybody wants to become Bhagavan now, so that you don't have to pay any obeisances to anyone anymore. That is why, that's why different types of approaches in there. But in bhakti process, we have this great difficulty, ego inside. And that ego won't disappear. Sometimes, we will try to be nice to others, only for the reason that we want something from him. That is not bhakti. That is selfishness. There's a big difference there. When we try to approach people and people will say, oh, he is a very nice person. He never he has no ego and all. Person has ego, but he is still relating to the body with a diplomatic way and trying to get things the way he wants it from him. That is not bhakti. What Krishna is saying here, whether we want it or not, simply seeing the presence of Krishna in every living entity and start paying obeisances to that, eventually it will come to a stage that this ego will not disturb you anymore inside. Otherwise, this ego will always be there, which will cause a lot of problem in our bhakti process. Bhakti will not develop in a heart like that. That is the point Krishna is making here. And to give that example, Krishna himself says that when I see a devotee like that, who is in that state, I myself take the dust from his feet and put it on my head. Niraveksham munim shandam nurvaiham samadarshinam anubrajamyaham nityam puyetyam grirenudhi. Otherwise there is no need for Krishna to purify anything. Only to explain the process of bhakti to us, how bhakti develops in a person's heart. Krishna is saying this to us, that this is the only way so that ragadvesham does not develop towards anyone in this world. Vinamahal padarajo vishegam. This is the reason why in bhakti process this is given the most important in the bhakti process. I will say why it is like that in the bhakti process. In bhakti process, surrender is the most important thing. Surrender is the most important thing. Able to deal with everyone, recognizing Krishna's presence in every living entity. Not only to human beings, but even to other living entities, including the cat, dog, cows, dog, asses, whatever it may be, any living entity, to all of them to recognize Krishna's presence in them and to deal with them in that with respect. That is praname dandavat bhumam asha chandala bhava. If you do that, Krishna says, in due course of time, that ego will disappear. That ego will disappear. So this is the importance in bhakti. Now, when we say that a devotee has to have this qualification of this surrender, does that mean a jnani doesn't need it? So people will say then that, oh, this bhakti process is pretty difficult. Let me go for the jnanam process then. That also will come at that time, isn't it? So, in answer to that, the difference is this. Jnanis normally do not pay any obeisances to others in that way. Like the way Krishna has spoken here for the devotee. For the devotee, Krishna says the easiest process, if you want to get rid of that ego from inside, is not to attend courses or seminars. Rather, anytime, anyone you see, recognize Krishna's presence in that body and pay your respects to him. Even if, in the beginning, Krishna says, even if you can't fall down, even when you see an enemy, even if you who is not very friendly to you or who has some inimical feelings towards you, even if you do not pay your obeisances on the ground, at least within the heart, recognize him as Krishna's another manifestation. If you think like that, that inimical feeling or ill feeling towards another person will not further grow inside. And in course of time, that will disappear from inside. This is the secret behind it. So wherever we have a difficulty with another person, or another living entity in any form, Krishna says the easiest way is Praname Dandavat Bhuvam Ashwachandala Gokaram. Completely or pay your respects to him inside your heart, accepting that recognizing Krishna's presence in that living entity. If you do that, Krishna says, over a period of time, bhakti will develop inside, and that will develop into self-realization later. So, after saying this, the question comes up, what about Jnani then? Does the Jnani does not require that? Jnani doesn't have to pay obeisances to anybody. The difference at that time, you can see, a Jnani does not see anyone inferior to him. This is the important thing. A Jnani who has the proper realization and knowledge inside, he will not look down upon anyone, and he cannot have any inimical feeling towards anyone. In one instance, a person asked a Jnani about this. So the Jnani's answer was that as soon as you see someone, all you are seeing there is the presence of the Supreme Truth inside him. So before you pay your obeisances, he has already paid his obeisances to you. Before you pay your obeisances, even though externally he may not pay your obeisances to you, he is always recognizing the presence of Krishna in every living entity as Antaryami, as Super Soul present in everyone. And it is not possible, literally it is impossible to pay obeisances to everybody, isn't it? Literally it is not possible. That means from morning to night you will be only paying obeisances. As soon as you, from here in this room you have to pay obeisances, say 25 or 30 people. As soon as you go out, you will see so many other people. If you have to pay obeisances to all, you won't get home tonight. So, literally it is not practical, it is a fact. But Krishna's point is that to start with, at least inside the heart, whenever you feel see another living entity, if you train your mind to see Krishna's presence in that living entity, Krishna says in due course of time, bhakti will develop in the heart. And the difference between a jnani or a person who follows the jnanamargam and the devotee is this. Devotee has no choice because he has to surrender the ego. And the easiest way to surrender the ego is to recognize Krishna's presence in every living entity and accept it in that way. That way he wipes out all raga dvesham that is developing within the heart. He can wipe it off simply by recognizing Krishna's presence in another living entity, even if he is an enemy. Even if he is an enemy. That is the devotee's process. Jnani's process, because through the process of knowledge he has come to understand that everything that is present in this world is nothing but spirit. The soul's presence in everything. He has already recognized the presence of the soul in a person. Therefore, he has already completed his obeisances there. He has already completed his obeisances. A devotee is unable to see the presence of the spiritual spark in a person. Therefore, he has to practice it this way. A jnani, because he is seeing the presence of spiritual spark in everyone, there is no possibility for him to develop any false ego inside. There is no possibility, because already when he sees a person, anyone, doesn't matter, for him there is no enemy in this world. For him there is no enemy in this world. Therefore, because he has no inimical feeling towards anyone, and simply he is accepting the presence of the spirit in everything, he doesn't have to practice it the way like the devotee is practicing. This is the difference between the devotee and jnani. So often when this is an important question, because normally when we pay obeisances, we will first start evaluating that person. Should I pay obeisances to him? Is he more qualified than me? If he is not qualified, then why should I pay obeisances to him? All these judgment goes on inside, isn't it? You can see this also in the temples, that when you see a sannyasi, you pay obeisances. When you see an ordinary brahmana, he is just a brahmachari. Who is he after all? Just ignore him. You don't have to worry about him. He is nobody. Why is it like that? That is not what Krishna consciousness is all about. So somehow in our own mind, we decided that he is superior and he is inferior. And so long as this problem is inside, it is very difficult to become spiritual. That's not spiritual. That's misunderstanding. That's following the organization, that's all. That's not Krishna consciousness. That's following the organization. Somebody start doing it, we all start thinking, yeah, we have to do it. Where is the difference? It's the same spiritual spark inside that sannyasi, inside the householder, inside the brahmachari. That's why Krishna is saying here, as a devotee, you cannot differentiate. Pay your obeisance to everyone, don't think whether he is qualified or not. That's why Krishna says, even to the dog and the cat. Even there, what's significant is Krishna's presence in them, not anything else. It is to that presence that you are paying your respects, and thereby you are getting out of that bodily identity, seeing that person in that body. That's the only way Krishna says you can come out of it. There is no other way. There is no other way. As a jnani, because he has followed another process and he has come to this point of realizing the truth, the presence of the spiritual spark, presence in everything, he is already in a state of paying obeisances to others. That state itself is like that. That he is recognizing everywhere only spirit soul is existing. There is no presence of any material body anywhere for him. So therefore, even though he may not pay obeisances like a way devotee is doing, in reality, both of them are on the same state. So, Praname Dandavat Bhumam Ashwachanda Alakhokaram. So in all these living entities, it is Krishna says, he will come to recognize it's me who is present. In other words, the soul who is present. Ahamam sarveshu bhudeshu. It says there, isn't it? In the Bhagavatam, if you look into the third canto, you will see there that in the third canto, Kapila Vasudeva says this to Devahuti Devi. Kapila Vasudeva says to Devahuti Devi. Athamam sarveshu bhudeshu Athamam sarveshu bhudeshu Bhudalpanam kradalayam arhayedhanam maitreya abhinena chakshusha. Then it says here that therefore, Kapila Vasudeva says, recognizing my presence in all living, sarva bhudeshu bhudalpanam, then it is the house where I live. And to see every body as a temple of Krishna. Budalpanam Pradalayam Arhaye Dhanamanabhyam Maitreya Abhinena Chakshusha. Without making any difference from one body to another, you should pay your obeisances to him. Abhinena Chakshusha, Maitri, and develop that relationship with that person. So, Puyaye Tyankri Renupi. And that is why in this verse Krishna is talking like this. So if you understand this whole concept, how as a devotee one has to, because here in this 14th chapter in Ekadasha Skandam, Krishna is teaching us how to develop bhakti in the heart. And Krishna told us the first problem, a devotee has this ego inside, and that is very difficult to overcome. There is no shortcut to get out of this problem of the ego. So if you want to free yourself from that, Krishna says the easiest process is that anywhere you find a spiritual spark present, any living entity, Praname Dandavat, fall down and pay your obeisances to him. Ashwa, Shwava, Chandala, Ko, Kharam, all examples. Cow, ass, Chandala, the lowest birth, Shwava, dog. No matter who it is, pay your obeisances. Don't discriminate. That is the point Krishna is making. Don't start thinking they are all lower than you and therefore you can't pay your obeisances to. If you think like that, it's going to be a long haul. That's why in the beginning verse before that, Krishna said there, in that verse before, Krishna said there that the qualifications of a person who is a devotee like that, he is Nirabhaksham, Vanimshandam, Niruvairam, Samadarshinam. That Samadarshinam, out of all these qualifications, Nirabhaksham, Munim, Shandam, Niruvairam, Samadarshinam, out of all this Samadarshinam is the most difficult one. That you will know. Okay, Nirabhakshatva means getting rid of all desires from inside. Even that is possible after a long practice or long practice of renunciation and detachment. This nirapekshatvam can develop in a person. Shanti also can come to a person. Munim Shantam. Enmity towards others is a thing in this world, nirvairam. One keeps oneself away from other living entities, nirvairam can happen. But samadarshanam is difficult. It's the most difficult thing. So that samadarshitvam, Krishna says, is the most important factor. And therefore, for a devotee, the only opportunity he has is praname dandavat bhumam ashwa chandala khogiram. After saying that, Krishna says that if you do that, automatically that false ego inside will disappear in due course and you will start recognizing the presence of the soul in that body. And as far as Jnani is concerned, Jnani automatically reaches that state. Because of his realization, he sees the presence of the soul in everyone. And to such an extent, Krishna says, association of those personalities can help. And it will take away, approach them with humility and not to keep that pride anymore inside. This is what the message in that verse. And then Krishna says in the next verse, Bhadhyamano bhimat bhakta vishaye ajidendriyaha. So now, in the last few verses, Krishna has spoken about bhakti, isn't it? What is bhakti means. And you can see here, verse from Mayyarpidal manasabhya, verse 12. Mayyarpidal manasabhya nirapekshasya sarvadaha mayalmana sukham yatal kradasya vishayalmanam akinjanasya dandasya shandasya samachedasaha maya santushtamanasaha sarvaha sukhamaya vishaha na parameshtyam na mahendradishyam na sarvabhaumam na rasadhipatyam na yoga siddhiravanabhavam va mayyarpidalme chadimadinanyan na dhadame priyama almayonir na shankaraha na jasangarshano na shri naivalma chayata bhavan nirapeksham munim shandam nirvairam samadarshanam anuprajamyaham nityam puyayetyam grivenubhi. After saying that, Krishna says, Nishkinjana mayyanurakta chedasaha shanda mahando akhila jiva valsalaha kamai analabdhadiyo jushandiya tannai raviksham navidu sukham mamam. So, you can see in these verses, when Krishna is talking about bhakti, Krishna becomes very eloquent. He wants to say a lot of things about bhakti. And Krishna considers Uddhava as a representative of the pure devotees. That's why Krishna is saying here that one who completely surrendered unto me, taken shelter of me, and completely surrendered to me, and at the same time, without desiring anything, who lives in this world, he is the best among the devotees. In Krishna consciousness or bhakti, there is no possibility of any desire developing inside. And bhakti is the result of bhakti. That is why Krishna says here. And what Krishna talks about here is the para bhakti, the pure bhakti, what is discussed in the Bhagavad Gita or Yoganotara bhakti. So here, that bhakti, what comes from the Bhagavad Gita also, Brahma Bodha Prasanna Alpa Nashojadi Nagamshadi Sama Sarveshu Bodeshu Madbhaktim Labade Maram. After self-realization, what kind of bhakti develops in a person, that is the kind of bhakti what Krishna is talking about here. This bhakti what Krishna is talking about is that kind of bhakti. But prior to self-realization, for a devotee, his main obstacle is this ego, unable to get rid of that from inside. So therefore Krishna gave us the clue or the process how one can escape from that problem in the ego. And after saying that, Maya Santushta Manasa, that the symptom of a devotee is that he is always happy. Maya Santushta Manasa. And Santushta Manasa. Why is he Santushta Manasa? Santushta Manasa, he is always happy inside. Why is he happy inside? He has received a great treasure inside. He has received a great treasure. Krishna says that treasure is bhakti. That treasure is bhakti. So therefore you will see this bhakti is considered by Krishna as one of the topmost treasures in the world. And we do not understand bhakti, so we think that bhakti is somewhat something which we find it very difficult to relate with. And bhakti is misunderstood or misinterpreted in different ways also in this world. So, important thing is, Krishna's point of view is that for a devotee, he says here, Bhadhyamano vivad bhakto vishaye ajidendriyaha praya pragalbhaya bhaktya vishayerna vibhuyade. Bhadhyamano vivad bhakta vishaye ajidendriyaha. If a devotee, by some reason, he has developed this kind of bhakti inside, if bhakti has developed inside, even if that person has not succeeded in getting over his sense gratification, sometimes it can happen, isn't it? Vishaye ajidendriyahi. Somehow or the other, there is some attachment for sense enjoyment. If it is still there, Krishna says, Bhadhyamano vivad bhakti. My devotee will get over it, he says. Praya pragalbhaya bhaktya vishayarna vibhuyate. That bhakti itself is so powerful inside. Krishna says, Praya pragalbhaya bhaktya vishayarna vibhuyate. At some point in time, he will be able to give up sense enjoyment. Sense enjoyment will not attract him anymore. Krishna is looking at bhakti from different angles and explaining to us that a devotee who has reached this state of bhakti, what Krishna spoke before, even if that person by some reason is attracted to sense gratification, because of the power of bhakti inside, eventually the desire for sense gratification will leave him automatically, without any causing any problem for him. This is the beauty of bhakti. This is the beauty of bhakti. Bhakti has got that power inside. But that bhakti is difficult to reach state. That is why Krishna is saying here the main obstacle in developing that bhakti is the ego inside. And that ego will only go, Krishna says, only at that time when you develop this pranamaya dandavad bhumam ashvachandala kogaram. So bhakti yogam, you can see in the Bhagavatam, after talking about jnanam, karmam, yogam, everything, Krishna brings eventually everything to bhakti and tie it down to bhakti. Tied down to, that is how Ekadasha Skandam is. The bhakti discussed in the Ekadasha Skandam is connected to jnanam, connected to karma, connected to yoga. All of them Krishna has spoken in the Ekadasham and eventually bring it and tie it down to bhakti. That without bhakti, Uddhava, none of them can help. That is the position. Whether you are a jnani, whether you are a yogi or one who follows the karma margam, all of them, according to Krishna, without bhakti is not going to become a successful process. So therefore, bhakti yoga process is important, and that is what it is stressed in this 14th chapter. We'll discuss it next Sunday again. Okay, so if it is like that, Krishna says in the next verses, Bhadhyamano vivad bhakto vishaye ajidendriyehi praya pragalbhaya bhaktya vishayerna vibhuyade yadhagnesu samardharchi karotyedamsi basmasan tadamad vishaya bhaktir buddhavehinamsi krusnasham. Here, in the Vaishnava Sampradayam, particularly in Ramanuja Sampradayam, there was a great personality who appeared after Ramanuja's time, called Vedanta Deshika. Vedanta Deshika was a great devotee. And people used to say about him as Sarvatantra Swatantra. He was such a personality that in bhakti nobody could say anything and find any fault in him. He was so perfect in all areas. He was respected by the society. And not only that, highly learned as well. And he wrote commentaries on all different systems of philosophy as well. At the same time, he was a great devotee. On the other hand, like Sudama, he was extremely poor as well. So, fully detached from the material life Vedanta Deshika, people used to offer him wealth. And he said many people used to encourage him to go to the palace and to live in the company of the king and the great scholars who were present there. And Vedanta Deshika used to reply them, they have got wealth. But he says, Asti me hasti shailagre vastu paidamaham dhanam. That was his reply. Asti me hasti shailagre vastu paidamaham dhanam. Vedanta Deshika's reply to them was like this. What he said was that that through my parents and grandparents, I received a great treasure they have taught me in life. That is bhakti. And that bhakti and experience what I have is much more valuable than any wealth in this world. He was able to openly speak this in spite of his great poverty and in the great difficult life what he had to live in this world. Totally detached to all kinds of sense gratification and total poverty, like Sudama was, and at the same time he was in immense bliss. And he as a devotee, his qualifications were so high. People used to say like this. And therefore, if you look into Bhagavad Gita, you will see the qualifications of a devotee, Krishna discusses there, isn't it? The qualifications of a devotee. What does he say? Adveshta sarvabhodanam maitra karuna evacha nirmamo nirahangara sukha dukkha samakshami santushta sadadam yogi yadalma dadamishchaya mayarpina mano buddhir yomal bhakta samepriyaha. Krishna, if you look into the nature of a devotee, qualifications of a devotee, and Krishna says there, Adveshta sarvabhudanam. The first thing is that he has no dvesham or hate towards any other living entity. And all what he has to offer is maitri, friendship. And also karuna evacha, karunyam, compassion for other living entity. Even though he is in extreme poverty, even though he does not have anything, any possessions in this world, still he feels compassion to others. Feels compassion to others, those who are struggling in this world. Maitri and Karunyam. And friendship to everyone. Nirmamaha, no attachment here, no mamato. Mamato means possessiveness in him. No possessiveness, mamato, nirmada, nirmamato. Nirmamo nirahangaram, freedom from ahangaram, false ego. And what else? Samadukha sukhakshanam. Happiness and distress equal mind in both situations. What else? Sandushta sadadam yogi. That devotee is always in a sandushtam, happy state. Yadalma dradamishchayaha. That such a person is very firmly rooted, firmly fixed in his goal. That is the most important thing. The goal is very firm and clear in his mind, what he is living in this world for. If you look into all the great devotees, you will see this quality in them. That they have very clear understanding, concept in their life, that they are living in this world for the sake of realizing the truth. That is, that firm decision has come to them. Yadalma Gadamishaya, my arpina mano buddhya. And they have handed over their mind and intelligence to Krishna. They are not taking ownership of anything that's happening in this world. The surrender is so complete that Krishna is doing everything through them. This is their mood all the time. They don't make plans of their own. Maya arpita mano buddhi. Everything is Krishna's decision. Krishna makes the decision. Krishna executes the decision. And they are so close, surrendered to Krishna, that whatever happens in life, they accept it as Krishna's prasadam. Maya arpita mano buddhi. Yomal bhakta samayapriyaha. Such a person, Krishna says, is very, very dear to me. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says this. And that is exactly what Krishna is saying here about a devotee also. Niraveksham munim shandam nurvairam samadarshinam anubrajamyaham nityam puye tangrirenubhi. That a devotee who is so dear to Krishna, his qualifications Krishna spoke here before, isn't it? That akinjanasya dandasya shandasya samachedasa maya santushtamanasa sarve sukhamaya disha. That devotee's nature, life is like that. He lives in this world in this particular way. Akinchanasya, Dandasya, Shandasya, Samachedasa. Maya Sandushta Manasaha, Sarve Sukhamayadishaha. That for him there is no distress in this world. In all directions there is only happiness. Why is that? Akinchanasya. He has no possessing anything in this world. You can imagine a state of consciousness of a devotee like that. Akinchanasya, Dandasya. All mind senses are in complete control. Shandasya, always in a peaceful state. Samachedasaha, always in that existence which is all living entities as far as he is concerned is Krishna's manifestation in this world. Because of that, Maya Sandushta Manasaha, there is no friend or enemy in this world, always in that blissful state. Sarve Sukhamaya Disha, always happy state. And that in all directions he is happy. In other words, what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita is Adveshta Sarva Bhodanam Maitra Karuna Evacha Narmamo Nirahangara Sugadukha Samakshami Sandushta Sadadam Yogi Yadal Madrana Nishchaya Mai Arpina Mano Buddhir Yomal Bhakta Samim Priya. So, qualifications of a devotee is the same definition in the Bhagavad Gita as well as in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And from that definition you can understand that Krishna expects these qualities to be present in a devotee. So, after saying that, wherever you put that person, he is in a happy state. Sarve Sukhamaya Disha. Sandushta Sadadam Yogi. Never any complaint in this world. And wherever Krishna puts him into that, he is in that happy state. Kulashekara Alvar says this in the Mukundamala also. Isn't it? If you read Mukundamala, you will see Kulashekara Alvar saying this. That whatever that happens to me, according to my Purva Prarabdha, due to my Prarabdha Karma, whatever that happens to me, I am not going to complain about it. And Surgam Abunarbhavam va Rasadivrityam Parameshtyam Na Siddhi. Whatever Krishna has spoken, Kulashekara Alvar also repeats the same thing in the Mukundamala. That devotee, Krishna says, he walks behind such a devotee. A devotee who is in that state, Krishna says, I follow him. That because Krishna considers there is nothing in this whole creation equal to that devotee. Therefore, he says, Sadhavo Hridayam Mahyam Sadhunam Hridayam Tuham. That I live in the heart of the devotee and devotee lives in me. This is how Krishna says about that. When did Krishna say this? Krishna spoke this to Durvasa Maharshi. When Durvasa Maharshi had the problem with Ambarish, King Ambarish, in the 9th canto, that story in the Srimad Bhagavatam, when Durvasa Maharshi followed, was offended Ambarish Maharaj, and Durvasa went to Vaikuntha and asked for shelter. So Krishna says to Durvasa Maharshi, as far as a devotee is concerned, I am helpless. Sadhunam Hridayam Mahyam Sadhavo Hridayam Tuham. He says there, Hridayam Tuham. So I keep those devotees in my heart. In other words, Krishna gives the greatest protection to the devotee. They are present in me, I am present in them. And it is my responsibility to look after them. Krishna says there. So bhakti process, when Krishna talks about this, that important thing Krishna wants to stress is surrender is the key to bhakti. If we want to become perfection in bhakti, surrender is the only way. And through that surrender, Krishna says here that many devotees have spoken like this to Krishna. Many devotees have spoken like this to Krishna. That when they surrender to Krishna, this is bhakti. In all processes, it is like that. That when bhakti develops in a heart, natural way, the devotee surrenders. The devotee surrenders to Krishna. So then he says here, Nishkinjanamai Anirakta Chetasa Shanda Mahando Akhila Jivavalsalaha Kami Analabdadiyo Jushandiyal Tannairaviksham Navidu Sukhamama. Verse 17. Krishna says here that Madbhaktanam Sughamedhava Devam Bhutamiti Mahando Nirabhimanaha. Sri Rajacharya Swamiji's commentary on that. He says here, Nishkinjanadinam Yatheshtam Hedu Madbhavanaha Madbhaktanam Sugham Edhava Devam Bhutamiti Mahando Nirabhimanaha. He says here, who are these great personalities? Who are these great personalities? In Krishna's definition, great personalities are those people those who have even the least trace of false ego inside. There is not even a trace of false ego inside. That is the definition of Sridhara Swami. Here, in this verse, Nishkinjanam Maya Nirakta Jayasa Shando Mahando Akhila Jivavalsalaha. So, Sridhara Swami is commenting on that to telling us, when Krishna sees as a Mahatma, who is that Mahatma Krishna is referring to? Is that Mahatma who has not even a trace of false ego inside. And such a person who has given up the false ego completely, and it is the false ego that separates us from Krishna. The higher the distance from Krishna, the higher is the false ego. The more the false ego, the distance is longer from Krishna. The distance is longer from Krishna. So that is how we have to understand that. That our separation from Krishna is experienced more when there is a high degree of false ego inside. The higher the surrender, the higher the recognition of Krishna's absolute position as the absolute truth, automatically the devotee surrenders. Why do we discuss Srimad Bhagavatam? Glorifies Krishna's instructions in the Bhagavatam only for one reason, that by hearing about Krishna from the Bhagavatam, we recognize Krishna's position as the absolute truth, and in a natural way, bhakti develops in the heart. Surrender happens to us. That is the reason behind it. So, after saying this, he says here that those who are completely freedom from false ego, those people, Ananda Chinmaya Hare Gopigaramana, addressing Krishna, one devotee says to him, Ananda Chinmaya Hare Gopigaramana, those who have given happiness to the gopis, and who is present in everyone's heart as the Chit Shakti, who is present in everyone's heart, I should not anymore think in presence of my existence. I am. That existence must leave me. That I have identified with this false ego for so long that I am finding now difficult to get rid of that from inside. It is the biggest problem in a devotee's life. All other things you can try and somehow bring it into some reasonable level. For example, anger or hunger or any other bodily needs, all that you can somehow bring it under control. But this one thing, false ego, is the most difficult thing to take it out. Before you know, it will pop up somewhere else in some form. So that is why it's given so much importance to it, that Ananda Chinmaya Hare Gopigaramana, that addressing the gopis, worshipable deity Krishna, addressing him, saying that I should never anymore think that I have an individual egoistic experience or existence in me anymore. If it comes like that I have an existence, I should only think in terms of my presence in all the other living entities. That is the devotee's prayer. Like that Jnanis do. Jnani is saying the presence of Krishna in every living entity, and that soul, presence of the soul within me, and that presence in every other living entity. So devotee is saying to Krishna that if that false ego what I have inside, if it is difficult to get rid of, then my prayer to you is like this, that at least give me this understanding that it is me who is present in all the other living entities in the form of the soul, in the spiritual form. At least in that way I will feel some humility within me. So devotee and the jnani, they are also looking for the same solution, eventually to freedom from the ego. So just like here, that many trees, if you cut it off, for a few days nothing will happen. But then again it will sprout again, isn't it? This false ego is something like that. So somewhere, especially big banyan trees, if you see big banyan trees, it will be spread around a large area. And it will have so many branches in so many different directions. If you try to destroy that banyan tree and cut the whole tree from the very bottom, you cut it off and go away, and after a few months if you come back, you will see somewhere from some root of the banyan tree it has sprouted again. Our false ego is like that. You can keep on cutting it in different ways, but it will keep on sprouting somewhere. This is the difficulty with that. That is why Krishna says it is the most difficult thing to clear up also. So it will come from somewhere. So similarly, false ego in the same way happens. So many different kinds of roots of that false ego is inside. And it is this false ego that's not allowing to attain the peace inside. That's the main reason. And there is no point in treating outside without treating inside for that. But that means where the root is. And it is like the virus in the medicine. They talk about the virus, isn't it? Virus, how it infects people and gets sick. In the same way, this false ego is the main virus in the spiritual life. And that virus will keep on causing problems some way or the other. Therefore, Yoga Vasishtam says like this: Ahangara Vashad Ayat, Ahangara Duradhaya, Ahangara Vadashashadiha, Nahangara Paroviripu. Vasishta Maharshi says to Ramachandra, Ahangara Vashad Ayat, everything is coming from Ahangara, false ego. Ahangara Duradhaya, all kinds of desires are also coming from false ego. Ahangara Vashad Iha, only because of false ego all our sinful reactions that develops into this, and the whole root of all this thing is Ahangaram. There is no other enemy higher than the false ego, he says here. Kamam, because of Ahangaram, false ego, anger, lust and all other desires develops. And it comes from that. There is no other enemy outside, he says here. So this thing, what is hiding inside Ahangaram or false ego, this is the greatest enemy in the spiritual life. And once that goes away, automatically you reach in a very higher state of bhakti. Higher state of bhakti. So it is this false ego that is inside us that we have actually deal in this world. One false ego meets another false ego, isn't it? And we mutually make an agreement that you don't hurt my false ego and I won't hurt your false ego. This is how all the transactions in this world is going on. And we call it as in different ways we try to put a cover to it. And this relationship between one living entity to another, the human body, particularly human species, mutual respect we call it, isn't it? What is this mutual respect? Mutual respect is you are respecting his false ego and he is respecting your false ego. And this is the name of the society. Society is nothing but a group of false egos working together with mutual respect. So mutual respect doesn't help in bhakti. Bhakti is a different science altogether compared to mutual respect. Mutual respect means you expect the respect from that person, only then you give respect to him. Isn't it? But in bhakti, it is the other way. You are not expecting any respect from anyone, you are willing to offer respect to everybody. That in the Shikshashtakam, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also says that, isn't it? He says that. So, this our wealth, what we carry with us, is this false ego all the time. So, and actually, only the name, it is ego, but he never goes. He never goes, it says, isn't it? So, which is the very root cause of the whole thing. But if you start inquiring about it, where is it? It doesn't exist. That is the beauty of this false ego, just like the mind, isn't it? So what does bhakti do? What bhakti does is, it basically brings down this level of false ego. It brings the level of false ego down. And what does Jnanam do? Jnanam completely rejects its existence. That is the difference between Bhakti and Jnanam. What Bhakti does is, Bhakti very quietly brings our ego down, and because if you search for ego, you won't find it. Where is it coming from? You start wondering, where is it coming from? Like the mind. You wake up in the morning, false ego wakes up and the mind wakes up. Isn't it? When you go into deep sleep, there is no false ego, there is no mind either. But in the morning, as soon as you wake up, both of them also wake up same time. That is how we start our day, isn't it? With the mind and the false ego. So what Krishna is saying here is that these two things, Bhakti minimizes this false ego. When Bhakti develops in a person's heart, the false ego starts disappearing from inside. What does a Jnani do? Jnani actually rejects the existence of a false ego inside, because for him, false ego doesn't exist. What exists, only reality, is the soul. He accepts that in total. So, so this false ego, what we talk about, there are different types also in the false ego in a person. Sometimes the false ego which has come to some kind of, some degree, it has come down, and in some others it is still growing. In different levels it appears in different people. So what is these two different kinds? One which is not completely, how do you call it, which is not, the false ego has not totally come to any, it is not decreasing, it is staying in a very higher level. There is another thing, false ego in a person, which has come down to a higher, which has gone down a lot, and it has come to some steady state in a person. We have to look at both, what they are. In one instance it says here, so one whose false ego is not at all uncontrolled way, it goes on. He thinks himself to be very big in this world. He expects everyone to pay respects to him, and they should offer their obeisances to him. And that is the nature of that false ego, which has not come to any control. It is not under any control. It is growing all the time. Uncontrolled false ego, which is growing all the time. And this is what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. If you look, you will see in that divine and demonic nature, when Krishna discussed that, Krishna mentions there something about this false ego. If you have read that chapter, you will notice that the divine and the demonic nature. Krishna says there that while talking about the demonic nature, he says there that Ishwaroham aham bhogi. There is a verse there. Ishwaroham aham bhogi. If you look verse number 15, 13, 14, 15. How a person who has that false ego, how he thinks. Idam adyamaya labdham, imam prapse manoratham, idam asti idam avime bhavishyati punardhanam. Asau maya hada shatru, hanishye chapare api chaparanavi, ishwaroham aham bhogi, siddhoham balavan api. This character, what Krishna is talking about, Ishwaroham aham bhogi, siddhoham balavan api. Ishwaroham aham bhogi, siddhoham balavan sukhi. Adyobhi janamanasmi, konyosti sadrsho maya, yakshe dasyami modishya, ityajnana vimohitaha. These two verses. Asau maya hadashatru, hanishe chaparanapi. Ishwaroham aham bhogi, siddhoham balavan sukhi. Adhyovi janavan asmi konyosti sadrsho maya yakshe dasyami modishya ityajnana vimohidaha. Let me read the translation. the demoniac person who has this kind of false ego, he thinks, so much wealth do I have today, and I'll gain more according to my scheme. So much is mine now, and it will increase in the future more and more. He is my enemy, and I have killed him, and my other enemy will also be killed. I am the Lord of everything, I am the enjoyer, I am perfect, powerful and happy. I am the richest man, surrounded by aristocratic relatives. There is none so powerful and happy as I am. I shall perform sacrifices, I shall give some charity, and thus I shall rejoice. In this way, such persons are deluded by ignorance. So, this personality whom Krishna is talking about here, Ishvaroham Aham Yogi, this kind of ego is gross ego. Sthula ahanga it is called. Sthula means it is on a very gross level, manifesting in a person. Manifesting in a person. Or in other words, some devotees say it is a false ego which is not fully ripe yet. It is still growing. It's not fully ripe yet. And it will give a lot of trouble, this kind of ego what is spoken in those two verses. You can see how it brings to so much problem in one's mind inside. This is one kind of false ego. So, in the realized soul among jnanis also, there is a kind of ahanda or ahangaram inside them. And they know very well, while they are living this world, they call it as Daktamada. Daktamada means it is not real, but it is there in them. It's not real, it's in them. Because that false ego will stay in them for the sake of executing their life in this world, for Vyavaharam's sake, or for purpose of living in this world, they will retain a small degree of false ego inside. Otherwise it is very difficult. So, like some devotees also, devotee also has some false ego, isn't it? Sometimes. For example, Hanuman, Anjaneya Swami, has a great false ego. Ego in the sense that his ego is always that I am a devotee of Ramchandra. I am a devotee of Ramchandra. Ramasya dasosmyaham, he says like that, isn't it? So what is that devotee? That is that false ego. It's not a false ego. Then it is a false ego that is imposed on Krishna or imposed on Ramchandra. Therefore, that he is Ramchandra's servant, always, that ego. And because that is imposed on Ramachandra, it's not considered to be a false ego anymore. It's not considered, it is a purified kind of false ego. So the first ego, what we talked about, is the one what you find in the Bhagavad Gita. That ego is very dangerous and it will cause a lot of trouble in this life. But this ego, which has already become somewhat under control, because it is all, like Hanuman has this ego, that I am Ramchandra's servant. Ramasya dasosmyaham, he says, I am Ramchandra's servant. That ego, because it is imposed on Ramachandra, that ego will not do any damage to him. That is a devotee's ego. That's a devotee's ego. So in the bhakti process, and it will not give any trouble. At the same time, in bhakti process, that is given importance. In other words, offer the ego also to Krishna. Like a devotee offers the mind to Krishna, intelligence to Krishna. Similarly, in the helpless state, when he finds difficult to escape from false ego, he offers the false ego also to Krishna. That is the way to escape from that false ego. So somehow or the other, to make our surrender complete to Krishna and to make it as possible, everything make it as Krishna's ego. Krishna's ego. That is why in bhakti process, those who have completely got rid of this ego from inside, and by offering that to Krishna, such personalities are, Krishna calls it as Mahanda in that verse. Such personalities, Krishna calls it as Mahanda. Mahandaha, Vasandavat, Logahitam Charandaha, Shanda Mahanda Nivasandi, Akhila Jiva Valsalaha. So, a devotee situation, if you read this chapter, you can see that if we develop these qualities, then we can say we have bhakti. If these qualities are not there, we can't even claim we are devotees. We can't even claim we are devotees, because this is the standard what Krishna has set up for the devotees' qualifications. Sometimes we think that if we study Srimad Bhagavatam, there is 26 qualities of a devotee spoken. No doubt about that. Kripalu, Agardadroha, and all other things mentioned in the Bhagavatam. They are there and we may memorize them. But these verses will tell you how those qualities in practice, practical life, how it manifests in a person. That is the difference between the 26 qualities of a devotee and what is spoken here. In these verses, Krishna is telling us that if a person has those qualifications, his relationship with me will be in this way, as it is spoken here. That means Krishna sees the devotee very close to him, provided Krishna sees that that devotee has all those qualifications what Krishna has spoken with respect to bhakti. With respect to bhakti. So we'll stop there. We'll have a 10 minutes or so. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Hare Rama Hare
Hare Krishna, there's some food and water there if you want to help.